Hello, guys. Just wanted to talk to you about this new idea I had. Well, it's not new to everybody else that this technology even exists, but new to me, and that's podcasting. So I am not familiar with this technique, but we're going to bull rush this whole setup and we're going to talk about my Facebook group. It's called The Signal Path. So, if you're not already on there, all you have to do is search it, and it's called The Signal Path. What we talk about is mostly musical instruments, gear, pedal boards, pedals, effects, amps, guitars, basses, any other instrument involved, and normally we just have a blast on there. So, with ado, this is The Signal Path.
Join our challenges. The Signal Path.
Hi guys, what's up? Tony here. Wanted to talk to you about gear. So, we are going to get started. This week's adventure has mostly been the Fight Club. Now, guess what? We're not supposed to talk about Fight Club. Rule number 2, not supposed to talk about Fight Club. Guess what? If you're listening to this podcast, we are going to talk about Fight Club. And so what we call Fight Club is actually just fun for us to make polls on particular items such as I would say influencers. So our main influencers are just anybody that influence us to play or that builds gear or manufacturers or brands. So what I did is I took it to the group, and ultimately we wanted to talk about this because I feel like it was very subjective. So with it being subjective, we wanted to just kind of have fun with it. It was really like no real leadership or objective to it, and it was just to share our experiences and why we picked certain things. So the key things we wanted to talk about were uh, pretty much the powers to be and kind of put everything into place. And these guys have always influenced us to either play better or build better, and that's why I wanted to talk about them. So you guys just hang tight and we're going to get started. All right, so I kind of had a bracket of 16 players involved with the whole Fight Club series, and what we wanted to do was just kind of do a rundown of some of the comments that we did on the Signal Path and what we chose to say that I would say is our favorites. And to get started with these, I am actually looking online at our Fight Club. So the first round that we did was kind of a tough one, but it really kind of gave it the whole Kickstarter. And we wanted to see if this guy would prevail or not prevail all the way to the end. In round 1, we discussed more or less a greatest guitar builder, and I really threw the best 2 under the bus. And I don't want to put people into camps of one side versus the other because both are very great in their honorability. And it's basically Fender versus Gibson. So our first round went as Leo Fender versus Les Paul. And Les Paul being the guitar or the artist himself. This really got out of hand real quick. And it was more or less, I wouldn't say a dumpster fire, but it was something that got out of hand because we really got subjective in this. So we wanted to say that the first guy that really came to mind was Leo Fender being a great inventor, mostly for guitars and amps. I know he made so many other things. And we wanted to talk about Les Paul, and Les Paul being the guitar that really inspired a lot of artists to be today, and as an artist, and both with Gibson creating this piece. So kind of in a Fight Club style match, no shoes, no shirts, right? And we wanted to talk about the style, and in the style, I would say that we're talking about more or less the guitars, but the comments really got out of hand talking about the artists themselves, or I would say Leo being the builder. So kind of wanted to do like the celebrity death match with it. So let's get it on. And for the most part, Leo Fender starts taking the first parts of the comments, and we really had the birth of Loud, and that was literally Leo Fender. I know that was really champing the amp, and also with the telly. So we're talking in the early 1950s. This guy really just took rock and roll to a new advantage altogether, made everything electrified. And then we had the Les Paul camp show up immediately, saying that that was the greatest guitar built for the greatest artist at the time. The guy could shred, and it really started getting real snappy. And what I mean by snappy, people started talking about the headstocks and Gibson's quality to versus the Fender's quality over the years. But that's only recent history with the snapping headstocks. Honestly, a 1959 Gibson Les Paul would probably go for a lot of bank right now if one came up for sale. And I would say that about a 52 Strat or even a 61 or 62 Strat. And a lot of those go for a lot of bank. But really, the 59 Les Paul really goes for a lot. I know a lot of guys want to say that Leo's kind of the greatest of all time. And they start listing all the different things he made. He made Music Man and G&L, and we really start talking about he made other instruments other than just the guitar. But like I said, these comments went out of hand. So by the first 5 hours into this and discussing, I would say that Fender was sweeping the leg. And I use that comment a lot to be funny, I guess, because of the Cobra Kai thing. For Gibson, just for the fact that the snapping headstock. But I think for real, they were really trying to do a Battle of the Giant in this, and we wanted to say that it just became fun, and the guys really had a healthy discussion on why certain guitars were very influential. And that's the best part of round one. And unfortunately for Les Paul, Leo Fender takes round one. Okay, on to round two. And in this corner for round two, we have Mike Matthews of EHX pedals fame and amp builder for the Sig 50 or MiG, whichever ones. Anyways, the dude is nuts with circuits. So Mike Matthews corner. And the second corner and the challenger would be Yoshi Ikegami, which is the guy that's leading the pack for Boss and Roland. And the reason why I chose these two, because we wanted to really think about the creativity of either side. And this is pretty much like EHX versus Boss pedals. And that's the fun part we wanted to talk about. And right away, the comments go that, Yoshi's leading the pack with Boss being literally the boss and taking charge because, they're named appropriately. They're really good pedals. They really put the effort in a closure design and switchability. And the comments start going right off the bat. They wanted to really point out Mike and his crazy ideas, because the dude was like ingenious with inventing things. I mean, it started with like the LPB1 boost. Now you have like the Big Muff, which is probably the most popular pedal for it being a distortion pedal, but also a fuzz at the same time. And people classify it either camp, and there's great debates on that. But that started from the LPB1. And this really put two guys in the camps. There's guys that have full-on Boss pedal boards, and there's probably more of those common than I would say a full-on EHX board. And we have a couple of guys that are just really into EHX as well, and they're really going Boss hands down, and Boss is number one. It's a really tough call for some guys because they have a mix of both EHX and Boss. I really didn't charge I would say a side to say, hey, pick a side. We were basically just having fun with it being subjective, and honestly, who would really fry some circuits and really get it, into innovation, I would say, and be creative. And I would say, hands down, that Boss won this challenge. So your winner for first set of heats in round two is Yoshi Ikegami for Boss pedals. And now we are going on to round three. Back for round three, and our challengers for this bout in our first corner, is innovator and mod champion Brian Wampler, who really rewrote the books for electronics. Versus, oh my goodness, English today, Tony. Versus the great JHS Josh Scott, who also builds compatibility with his history knowledge and his circuitry knowledge of clones and making the best and champion the best circuits that are out there and keeping our vintage history alive. So, really, this got out of hand real quick, just like the Leo Les Paul battle. But mostly, it really goes on to debates on Wampler really testing circuits and breadboarding, which I believe also helped Josh Scott get started as well. People are saying hands down to Wampler because he has podcasts and like Chasing Tone, but JHS has like the JHS show and shows our vintage history when it comes to circuits. A lot of people really had a hard time picking between the two because these are two great leaders in our pedal industry. It was really tight call. About 12 hours in, it was like 12-7 with Wampler leading. Very lengthy discussions on why innovation of grabbing a clone, like saying like taking all the big muffs and making the muffaletta or all the tube screamers and making the bonsai. That was more or less leadership on learning how all the caps and resistors and clipping options happen between all those pedals and putting them in one platform, which was innovative as well. So you don't have to go and buy several versions to A/B them and find your favorite one. That was available. But with Wampler, there's things like the Terraform, which I like personally because that's my favorite modulation pedal. And to me, that's one of my bread and butters that stay on my pedal board and really keep all the options open for me. So it helps with my creativity and creative mind to create textures with platforms like that. And then it starts getting into discussions. It's kind of like choosing between In-N-Out Burger or Whataburger, and it's like picking your favorite burger joint. They all make burgers, so these guys really just had fun in the chat thread, and it was a tough call. But after a 12-hour period, Wampler actually took the win for round number 3, and now we are going on to round 4. All right, in this corner for the first heat of round 4, we're putting up two tech giants when it comes to digital and analog meet and collide with the new DSPs. And what we're saying is we want to choose Walrus Audio and in the second corner, Earthquaker Devices. So these guys are very close in comp when it comes to things like the frontal design of the enclosures, blending digital and analog circuits and making voltage ramps and really getting headroom out of a pedal, doing the best of practices really on the layout, knob selection, switching and selection with the secondary options. So these guys have really started making a way through the 2010s in this last decade with blending digital versus analog technology together and using DSP to do so. So I wanted to put these two giants together, and this was a fast heat. So I'm gonna have to say this went by really fast because we really gave it less than a 12-hour period, and I wanted to be fast paced in the group as much as possible because we're trying to cover a lot of ground. So don't want to spend all day on this, but I kind of really throw a comment out there first that kind of like a Colt versus Jamie drum battle because I thought that'd be fun too, and not just talk about the circuits, but they really have on-site bands that they use to create things live in the mix and really help develop their sounds and hone in on their technology and what works well in a mix, which helps them develop and breadboard better, I believe. And it helps with creative skills as well. They really have some creative pedals that are out there that, both in drives and modulations, and trying to cover a lot of landscapes when it comes to tones. But Earthquaker was starting to take a landslide on this against Walrus very quickly, and really had probably about only 15 votes and it was getting real close towards the end. A lot of Walrus guys were starting to chime in saying, they have newer stuff coming out, and they're kind of going more into the modulation world, where Earthquaker's kind of going to the drive world, which has been done already, but, going back to the roots, I think they're finding a way, and they're just trying to make it relative for this chit chat. But for this one, it became close, and we wanted to say that with this close call, it's actually Earthquaker that wins, and it literally wins by a point, which was a very close round. But both very creative guys that really make great pedals when it comes to textures and landscapes. So that's why I wanted to put these two giants together as well. And our winner is Earthquaker Devices for round 4. Now we're going on to round 5. All right, into round 5, we're going to put our budget pedal champs from the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. We're going to do MXR versus DOD. Oh my goodness, this was a fun one for me because I wanted to say that there's a lot of guys in the MXR camp already. And, MXR eventually gets taken on by Dunlop, Ernie Ball in that area. But DOD ends up going to Digitech and that realm as well. For me, I've been a fan of both myself because there's many pedals that literally just lay around. But like this, I have a DOD. I have a DOD 250 clone. It's actually the gray box. I'm showing it on screen for guys that are listening on the podcast. And to me, that was like one of the first rippers. But MXR came right away with the Distortion Plus. And it really changed the landscape for the 80s. And everybody wanted that crunch sound. And that's why those pedals still are alive today in some of the best circuits, and it's simple circuits, 2 knob operation, too simple, volume and gain. And putting MXR against DOD, the guys throw up in the comments, MXR all day. DOD, because of the short lifespan before the joint venture and then acquisition for Digitech. MXR is still around today, and they still make MXR. Well, they still make DOD too, but a lot of guys wanted to discuss the two because of the camps. There's guys that literally have a full-on MXR board, and there's a few guys that have a full DOD board. And honestly, it was a tough call. But again, fast pace. With this being as fast paced as it is, this literally went to a 4-hour round. And MXR literally ends up landsliding against DOD on this one and takes the medal for round number 5. And now we're on to round number 6. Alright guys, this got serious. Round number 6. Round number 6 is 2 retail giants. One being exclusively online and the other having online and big box store capabilities. This is Guitar Center versus Sweetwater. My goodness, this got out of hand real quick. And there's a lot of guys that love their Sweetwater reps. That's basically what I'm going to say. A lot of guys are saying Sweetwater plead no contest for Guitar Center. And then we actually have Guitar Center store managers and employees that actually chime in and says, they provide on-site service that are excellent service. And these guys I know because I've known them in my group for a long time, and they've had good discussions that they provide top quality service. And if they can't get the instrument, they'll find it within one of their stores, if it's in the used department, that is. And I think Sweetwater's now taking on the used inventory as well, because the key is availability. Somebody wants something, they always want it like right now. A lot of guys are impatient, I would say, when it comes to gear and that ratio. Matter of fact, I actually contacted my Sweetwater rep and was asking them about Telecaster exclusives, because I know NAMM's coming up and taking care of that, trying to get the edge on what's being released from Fender, if they got some kind of edge on that. But what they have in stock right now for Fender exclusives, I just wasn't happy on the finishes, to be honest, because they're a bit more on the pastels and the Easter colors. But for me, I'm just a normal guy that's a weekend warrior, and has fun playing guitar. I'm not too picky on finishes, but if I'm gonna shell out $1,500, I think I might actually get a little picky on the finish. But Guitar Center, if they had their exclusives as well, I literally had to go in store and ask a couple of guys. And the shops where I'm at, they're pretty much empty. I don't know if it's due to pandemic reasons or whatever, but they didn't really go into that when it goes into discussions. They really were making memes about it, and oh my goodness, there's a meme that they put in, and it's literally the Rock'em Sock'em robots, and they literally are bouting, and it shows the Rock'em Sock'em robots. One side Sweetwater, one side's Guitar Center, and Guitar Center's getting his head plumb cleaned off, and it's a bit of fun, and we ended up sharing that. I ended up being the mascot of our entire Fight Club series, to show our finale as well. But I had to kind of step in there and referee a bit. But honestly, Sweetwater took this one by a landslide for round 6. And I would say that was probably our funnest round if you ever go in and read the comment thread. Alright, guys, round 6, Sweetwater sweeps it away. And we're now starting into round 7. Alright, guys, round 7 is the Amp Giants. Randall Smith of Meza Engineering, Meza Boogie, and going against our vintage champ, I would say Jim Marshall of Marshall Amplification. And this really put things in the camps really quickly because a lot of the guys from the Les Paul Club showed up and really supporting the Jim Marshall. And there's a lot of guys that really supported the Randall Smith. There was an immediate confusion because guys were putting Randall Smith into a camp where he made Randall amplifiers, and Randall didn't make Randall amplifiers. I know the name sounds confusing. His first name's spelled the same way, but actually this is the guy from Meza Boogie that modded a Princeton amp for Carlos Santana, and he tried it out and he said, man, this thing really boogies. So that's how Meza Boogie became a name. And to me, it was a household name. It's actually my favorite amplifier. Just now trying out a few Marshall and British style amps like Vox and Orange. I actually got an Orange Tiny Terrier, but everything has its place and its textures and tone, and this really put things in the camp really quickly. This chat didn't last long. It was another 4 hour, and I was trying to get to these so I can get to the final bout for the weekend. And with Meza and Marshall, it looks like Marshall was taking a quick lead. It gets down to the last hour when round 7's done. We were saying that basically it was a close call, and Marshall actually takes this one for the amplification. And now, with round 7 done, we are now on to round 8. Okay, this is the battle of the YouTube Giants for round 8, and in our first corner is That Pedal Show with Dan and Mick versus the JHS Show with Josh Scott and his crew at JHS Pedals. And this took off very quickly because, again, we were really trying to make these bouts really fast, but this ended up in almost 70 comments on which one was a greater giant when it comes to following. And instantly, the JHS Show was taking their fan favorites as well, and a lot of guys really split decision on this. And I didn't really force the guys to make one or versus the other, and I guess it was really on the vernacular of who's got the most content and what's the value added in the content. And when I mean content is kind of like what I'm doing right now. I'm generating content to make this YouTube video and podcast all in one right now. And these guys really bring it every single week. These guys are consistent. Every Thursday changes it to Friday. History lessons on the equipment that we know and love today. I would say not so much trade secrets because, I mean, it's kind of exposed now with everything being available on the internet, but showing how to create textures and tones. Both shows do this. A lot of guys went JHS because of the historical values and the nerdy content, and they do it in such a shorter format. Some guys like the lengthier discussion when it comes to That Pedal Show. So this was really kind of split camp. And again, with the 4 hour period, we were able to narrow this down, and it was getting close. It was getting real close on the comments as well. Had to kind of step in and referee between the two because they're really going into two camps. Well, who has I would say the general idea of making everything interesting, and they were saying, well, one does self promotion a lot, which I don't know why that's frowned on because I try to share everybody I possibly can, myself included, and just share the goodies. That's what these two YouTube shows really do. They really share the goodies, and that's what I'm getting at. So it ended up coming down. It was a really close call. It ended up being like 10-12, but it comes back to 18-12. And I had to call it. Had to step in with the referee, technical decision that JHS show actually won on this one. So that is the end of our first rounds in the heat. So we kind of did like a semifinal. And I want to go on to now what I consider the semifinals. On to the semifinals. Remember the first rounds, we had our champs for the 8 rounds. The rounds were 1 and 2. I just went ahead with Leo Fender versus Yoshi Ikigami. Now this was a tough call because we're putting a more subjective feel on creators and what they create. And honestly, this was hard to put Roland Boss against the, I would say, the founder of electric guitar and technology, Leo Fender himself. But honestly, the first round is a clean sweep. Honestly, everybody's just like Fender, hands down. His name's everywhere, household name. I know Boss is a household name, but as far as a creator and, well beloved, was literally that first round was swept by Leo Fender. So that's the end of that first round. Second qualifiers for the semifinals. This is the second round, and we were putting the next 2 rounds of the last ones together. This is Brian Wampler versus Earthquaker Devices. And this one ramped up real quick as well because we're kind of going into 2-hour and 4-hour blocks to get these done. A lot of people jumped on EQD right away because of their creativity and their favorite enclosures that they wanted to talk about when it comes to pedals and how everything works and what they can use this for or that for. A lot of guys really jumped in the camp where Brian Wampler was the guy that really started the mod community and got things going in DIY and showing guys how to do things electronically. Just breadboarding and testing everything and, well beloved. But this was a close call, and I had to call it. But Wampler wins this one by 1 vote. So that's the end of that second round. The third qualifier was where we took MXR as a top budget, but that went against Sweetwater as a retailer. And a lot of people were like, huh? So with those comments, mostly they were saying, well, Sweetwater sells MXR, so obviously Sweetwater. But I had to really create a creative platform in this content. I'm like, well, one's a distribution platform and internet sales, and the other one creates circuits. And one can create circuits and sell their own store, but that doesn't really help them in the distribution climate. But the other one can only sell what the product is. So I guess what we're selling, this idea is, I guess people love candy from Sweetwater. That become the biggest discussion out of all this. And it really started, they're, instead of throwing rocks, they're throwing candy at each other. Like, what's their favorite hard candy? And they're like, MXR never gave me candy. And so, with this hilarity, Sweetwater really sweeps the round on this one. And that's round 3. The last qualifier, we're going for round 4. And I can't seem to pull it up here for this last heat. And that would have to be Jim Marshall. And what was the other one? I need my notes. My notes are killing me, guys. Bear with me one second while I pull this up. So, round 4, we actually had Jim Marshall versus the JHS show. And honestly, this is kind of like the Sweetwater MXR. These two camps do not make any sense at all. And that's the fun part of the signal path, is that we're just really just on there to have fun and share our ideas and just really have fun with this. So obviously Jim Marshall, creative legend when it comes to amplification. Guy took a Bassman amp and modded it so it would work over in London. Honestly, like they use a different voltage over there, so they were like, "Oh, how do I figure it out?" Because apparently you couldn't just plug a Fender in the wall over there, and it took them quite some time, but they made it, and that made the amp giant what they are today, and what's now known as more or less the British sound, along with Vox amplification. But really, you're putting an amplifier against a YouTube show, which is the JHS show, and they're saying that even though that Josh Scott probably owns everything made by Marshall, which is probably true. I don't know. I didn't fact check this. I'm not going to. I got enough time trying to create content and letting these guys have fun every single day and coming up with these crazy ideas like this Fight Club. And honestly, the sweep of the leg, Marshall is taking the lead in this. It only had a few votes for JHS as a show, and this really put the end to the semifinals, and Jim Marshall wins this one. So now we are going into what I call the Final Four. As this is the Final Four, and this became madness, and we're only in February. Honestly, this was a challenge because guys are, throwing their favorite Sweetwater candy at each other just to get to the answers. And these comments took off real quick. So, again, with us being fast paced, here's the two brackets. You have Leo Fender versus Brian Wampler with Jim Marshall versus Sweetwater. And these are all giants of every industry in their crafts, in their abilities, in their creative abilities. Distribution platforms, you name it. I mean, big companies here. So the first one was Leo Fender versus Brian Wampler, and honestly, I felt bad for Brian Wampler because it's not easy to put this guy against the guy that created electric guitars. And honestly, everybody went hands down Fender on this one. I didn't even see like a Brian Wampler vote, which I don't think is even a fair fight. In this. But again, if this is Final Four, you got to bring it, and the underdogs are really hard to, champion unless they have like that Cinderella story. And Brian Wampler was, premier boutique Cinderella and revamped the entire 2000s into the DIY community, which Leo Fender at that time was probably G&L musician, just leaving musicians, man, kind of stuff. And in the last years of his life and that kind of thing. And, RIP to Leo Fender, well beloved guy. And really just swept the floor. Leo Fender wins the first round, hands down. And that's just through the thread of the comments. And both of these matches together would be anywhere from a 2 to 4 hour period because we're really trying to get to the finale. The next one is actually the Jim Marshall versus Sweetwater. And oh my goodness, this got to a battle where I had to say, please stop throwing candy at Jim Marshall because that's not fair. So to make it a fair fight, I told everybody, keep everything above the belt. No below the belt. These guys got nasty real quick. And we're saying, well, like Jim Marshall made the best amplifiers of all time. Sweetwater's never made an amplifier. And, just really drug it out and knock out, drag out, and a lot of guys love their Sweetwater rep, I guess, and that, they were calling them on the phone. It was like, I need a Marshall amp stat, and they can get a Marshall amp whenever they get it. But Marshall keeps coming out with new products as well, and, their favorite Marshall amps. And because it's kind of the winter time right now, they said, well, my Marshall amplifier can double as my radiator and heat my room. So they were really just throwing everything they can creatively think of. But this one was also a close call as well, and honestly, Jim Marshall takes the second round of the Final Four. And now we're going to talk about the big finale. Jim Marshall versus Leo.
Come on, Johnny. All celebrities are two-dimensional.
Okay, you two punks. I want a good, clean fight. Any questions?
Yeah. Can I do your granddaughter? Yeah.
I'm in no mood for your wives' crack. Let's get it on.
Get it on? I'm not gonna get it on with you, dude.
You folks at home are witnessing the first ever battle between two living, breathing cartoon characters.
This is the battle of the giants. And with so many rounds taking place at such a fast pace, we are for the heavyweight class. Your challenger, Jim Marshall, to Leo Fender. And this sparked a lot of debate. There's many guys that jumped into one camp. And honestly, we've had guys that come out of nowhere. Like, I would say like the Undertaker came through the crowd and they were saying, well, let's throw PV in there, and wanted to throw their favorite amps. And I was like, no guys, this has to be a fair fight. You can only say Jim Marshall or Leo Fender. So I had to step in real quick. No outside influences. No chairs thrown in the ring. No tables. We wanted to make sure we kept this fair. And a lot of guys are like, Leo, hands down, he created it all. And a lot of guys are like, Jim Marshall, because those are my favorite amps, and they make the best tones, you know. And everybody's like, well, he copied Fender Bassman, and that's where it started. So there was a lot of that debate. And guys are coming back, well, neither one gave me candy about Sweetwater. And I'm like, that round's over. So we really had to step into those. But this was fun, guys. Like, honestly, this was fun. If you're not in the signal path in here just creating shenanigans and fun banter, this was just fun. An all-around fun for these guys. It's something they look forward to all the time. So that's the reason why I create these kind of things. And honestly, it's just a poll. I mean, you know, use the tools that are there, guys. And that's honestly what we're doing, is just, you know, making fun of the situations. I actually took photos of all my equipment, and I had one Marshall versus 3 Fender objects. And I literally told the guys, I need more Marshall equipment in my house. And so they all agreed on that, and they started just throwing up pictures of their gear and sharing, you know, what influenced them to play. It wasn't particularly Leo Fender, but it was the products. Like, one guy's a Smashing Pumpkins fan. He was like, I'm a Strat fan into a Marshall. And I'm like, well, it can't get no better than that. You do use everything you have on hand to make the tones you have. And these guys really just had fun. And honestly, Jim Marshall did not have the last, you know, seconds of breath left in them. And they were just finishing it off like, everything in my house is more Fender than Marshall, and Fender this, Fender that. And honestly, Leo Fender went through all these battles and not even a dent in the Fender. I mean, the guy created multiple platforms, multiple instruments, and hands down, probably one of the ingenious inventors of what I said the winner was in the 20th century. So your winner for the Fight Club Challenge at the Signal Path is Leo Fender. And that is our top challenger. How'd you like that, guys? If you like that, throw up a thumbs up. Give us a rating. Honestly, the Signal Path is where we just go and chit-chat and have fun. Share memes, share equipment. It's not a pretentious place. It's a judgment-free zone. It's a safe zone. We try to keep it family-friendly. Have fun every day. I post memes on there a lot, but I try to share equipment with the guys. People ask questions. We're always on there just to challenge each other to be creative and be a way that we can help the next guy. And that's what we're really all about. It's just going on there and having a good time. Guys, if you really enjoyed this and like this podcast and this YouTube, throw me up some comments. Tell me what you think. Honestly, if you have not been on the Signal Path, you need to join today and jump on that bandwagon, because there's stuff on there daily. We're fast-paced and challenges and polls and just have a blast every single day. I can't say enough about our guys. They're honestly some of the best group members when it comes to making content and sharing the things that hone in on their craft and sharing their goodies. And honestly, guys, share the goodies, share the memes. We're there for your content. We're there to help you with your questions, anything that you need. Leave me a comment on this platform any way you can. Get a hold of me. I will be glad to answer your questions. That's really what the Signal Pass all about, guys. And to wrap up this entire podcast and video, I wanted to be able to thank everyone that's made this happen. All my mentors when it comes to guitars and equipment. Honestly, these guys make the very best of it every single day for me. Number one's Howard Card, and he really taught me how to play guitar. He actually carved this nice, really killer S-Series Ibanez right here, which is dear to my heart. I'm showing it on video at the moment. He's always been my guitar mentor, and this guy literally told me just to pick up anything you can to make noise, and just make noise and make it happen. And that's really what I'm trying to share with you guys as well. I know he's not on the social platforms as much anymore, but I wish you the best of health, Howard, and appreciate all the things you taught me as well. Everybody at TSP, let's keep it strong, guys. Keep it positive. Keep it pedals, keep it amps, keep it guitars, whatever equipment, whatever content you have, throw it on there. And I appreciate each and every one of you. You guys have a blessed day. God bless.